So hello there and welcome to another tutorial. My name is Tanmay. Actually, this time we're going to be going over the Google or Gmail OAuth 2.0 authentication API. And also we're doing it in iOS, not any of the other languages it's supporting, or at least this time, such as PHP or Ruby. But anyway, before we get into that, this video is going to be essentially a part 2 to my chatting app, so there will be a link in the description to that video. So now let's continue. Now, what am I doing in this video? Essentially what I'm doing is I'm going to be telling you how you can take the old chatting app and you can, instead of having to put in your own username and password into the app, you can log into your Gmail account, which will act as authentication for the chatting app. Now, the way we're going to be doing this is pretty simple, but first of all, let me just get out of the way. What are some advantages of doing this? Well, one main advantage is security, and the next advantage is just overall relief for both the developer and the user. So now, security. What does this mean? In our old chatting app, we're just taking the username and password of the user, putting it straight into our parse database, not encrypting it of any kind or anything. So we're limited by parse security. If someone were to get by parse security, then they'd easily get into our database and hack all the chatting app accounts. However, with Gmail, we know that Gmail has one of the best security features in the world. If you have Gmail, your account probably won't get hacked. And so we're utilizing the security of Gmail, and also it's much better for the user because they have just one set of username and password that works with all of their Google stuff and all of their account stuff, so they don't have like a billion different passwords going around that they have to remember each one. And so those are the advantages out of the way. Now, which API are we going to be using? It's called OAuth, or Open Authentication 2.0, because they've deprecated one. And so we're going to be using the iOS version of this library, which can sometimes be very hard and frustrating. And this actually took me quite a while, over maybe even a week, to actually get set up and running, because sometimes I would just get an error where the user header search paths wouldn't work or something like that. But this video will make it very easy for you to be able to do that. So now let's just discuss how the algorithm of our authentication will change. So let's get started with what was our old algorithm. Well, put simply, we would have usually a client on this end. Let's just say this is client. Now, client signs in or signs up for this app with a username as client 342 or something like that. And his password is something like client is the best. Not the most secure password, but anyway. Now, what's going to happen is this is going to be named username, and this is going to be named password by the app. Okay? Then we're going to have our parse database here. And over here on our parse database, we're going to have our users database, or table, sorry, in which we will take this username and password and upload into here. And notice, there's nothing going on while we're uploading. We're not encrypting it. We're not putting it in a secure place. We're not doing anything with this username or password which would make it secure at all, really. And so this is named as an unsecure method, or actually, I wouldn't say highly insecure, because we're using a parse database, not a custom MySQL database, but still, this is potentially a security threat. I'm not trying to say that Parse isn't secure. It's extremely secure. But I don't want to take any chances with extremely confidential information, okay? And so I would honestly label this unsecure. However, let's just jump over to a new method over here. Over here we have Gmail. Okay, now Gmail has a username and password as well. You still have to use a username and password. But guess what? Your Gmail account works with YouTube. It works with Drive. It works with pretty much everything else you have for Google. And it also works with third-party apps such as Stack Overflow. And so as you can see, it's starting to become evident that once you have a username and password for a Gmail account, you could easily have it refer to literally every single other one of your accounts. And the best part is, let's say Stack Overflow security is breached. Not to worry, your Gmail password is stored with Gmail, not with Stack Overflow. So if Stack Overflow security is breached, your password is not leaked, only your username. However, if Gmail security is leaked, yeah, your password's out for pretty much everything, but still that's a very, very rare occurrence. So that hasn't happened for almost 2 years now, maybe even 3. So as you can see, this is secure, it's easy for the user, and it's also very easy for the developer. Because instead of having to program all of this in, all that they do is this now. They have their app, or let's just name this client again. Now client has all of these accounts, every single one. Okay? And then client also uses the app, so just so it doesn't confuse you, these apps are not at all related with how we're going to be using Google Authentication. But now we can see that client uses this app, and so our app in general will now be taking, first of all, Google Authentication. And so to put this really simply, all that we're really doing in this app, we say to Google, hey, authenticate this guy called client. Now, client will log into his Gmail account, and if he gets the right username and password, then it'll be like, yes, sure, to the app. The authentication was correct. You can let this guy have access to his account. But let's say he's signing up. How do we do something then? Well, Google will give us the email address so that we can use that as his username. So we don't need to store his password anywhere. We just store his email address as his username and let Google do the rest of the authentication. If he's able to get into Google with this email address, we know that it's him, and we can continue and give him access to chat. And this is what makes him happy. So that's what our final goal should be, to get him to chat using Google Authentication. So as you can see, there's a big jump from uploading an unencrypted username and password to a database, or using one of the most secure forms of authentication in the world with your app. And so that's going to be it for the whiteboard part. Next, I'm going to be showing you how exactly you can use the APIs on an iOS app. So, without further ado, let's get straight to the Mac part. So yeah, I just started editing this video. I was just stitching up the clips and stuff, and I just found out the original subscriber that asked me the question, Irshad, just sent in a picture of himself to feature in the video. So yeah, I'm going to be showing his picture on screen now. I believe it's already up. But his question was, how can I use, instead of custom authentication, something like Gmail OAuth authentication? In, let's say, a chatting app. He also had a few more things to do with the chatting app, but there will be later videos for those. So yeah, for now I'm going to be telling you how you can use Gmail authentication or OAuth to log into apps. So let's get straight into the Mac part now. So welcome back to the Mac part, and now we're going to be actually implementing this in Swift. So now, let's just make my face smaller, move it to the corner. Now, I've opened up the Google Quick Start Guide, and there will be a link to this in the description, so you can actually use it. Now, I'm not exactly going to be going through step 1, because that's just turning on the Gmail API. There's a set of instructions that are extremely straightforward, just a few button clicks for you to set up the Gmail API, and then we'll be done. So I'm just going to assume that you've already set the app up, and so once you've set it up, you should have credentials here, and when you click on it, it should show your real credentials. So now what we're going to do is we're going to skip straight to step 2. Now step 2 will include downloading the actual Gmail APIs and using and setting them up, etc., etc. So what you're going to do is go to step 2. You see this little code block here. Hover your mouse over it, and in the corner you'll see this little window over here that looks like 2 clipboards. So just click on it, and it shall copy all this code here, all of this. And now all you need to do is go to a terminal window, type in, I just like to do this, mkdir, let's say just Google app, then I'm going to cd into Google app. If you don't know what I'm doing, I'm just creating a directory called Google app in my home directory, and then I'm going into it. Then we copied all that code, so just click Command V, and it'll execute them all one by one by itself. You don't need to do anything. And once it's done, perfect, it's done. So now we have, if I go into my home folder, we have this Google app over here, and we have all of the Google APIs inside of this folder. So now if I move my face up, go into Xcode, now if I say Control Command N, it will create a new workspace for me, and I'm just going to put this inside of my home directory Google app, and I'm just going to name this app workspace, because this is really a workspace. If you don't know what a workspace is, again, it's actually just a collection of projects or multiple files which are for Xcode. Now let's just create this, and that's going to be it. So now let's continue with what the quick start says. There are going to be some modifications at the end, but now we really just need to follow what the quick start says. So I'm going to not scroll down. I'm going to go into Mission Control really quickly and move Google Chrome beside my Xcode window so that it's a bit easier, and then move Finder beside it. That's already there. Okay, so now let's start with step 3. Prepare the workspace. First of all, we've already created a workspace. It's not named Quick Start, but that doesn't matter. Then what it says is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the directory that we were in for the Google app. Then double click on GTM Session Fetcher, go into that directory, go into Source, and you'll see this little Xcode project here. Yeah, take this and drag it. Keep it on the edge of your screen and drag it into your Xcode's file manager on the side. Then go back to Directories and double click on Google API Objective-C Client. Go into Source and take this Xcode project, gtl.xcode project. Again, move it into your Xcode workspace. Note, this Xcode project should not be under GTM session fetcher core. No, it should be above it, meaning it shouldn't go inside of that Xcode project. It should be separate. Now let's see what it tells us to do. Okay, so now it says select the GTM session fetcher project. I'm assuming it's this one, the core. And then it's saying add a new target of iOS framework and library Cocoa Touch static library. So iOS framework and library Cocoa Touch static library, and it says to name it GTM session fetcher lib. I'm just going to copy this and paste it into Xcode. Click finish, and it has created the target. Now what we need to do is go into build phases, compile sources, click on the plus button, and you see this folder, GTM session fetcher. Click command and select every single .m file inside of this folder. Click enter or add, and it has added these into the compile sources build phase. Then select the GTL project. Then what you want to do is go into build phases, link binary with libraries. It already has security and system configuration. So all you need to do is add, let's see over here, libgtm session fetcher lib. Okay, libgtm, this one. Now click add, and as you can see, it's added it in. Now, this is where I actually first got an error. What you have to do is come over here into build settings and say, what was it called? User header search paths. In this little place, double click and click the add button. And also just let me check to make sure. Yeah, I made a really small mistake. What you're supposed to do, just remove this library, just ignore that. Before you start doing any of this stuff, you have to actually click over here and go into GTL Touch static lib. Then you need to add libgtm session fetcher lib. And then you need to add, go into the build settings and go user header search paths, double click on here, click the add button. Now what you need to do, this is quite important, so listen, go over to Finder, go back to directories again, and go into your GTM session fetcher folder. Take the source folder, don't go into it, take it and drag it into this text field that Xcode's giving you. Now select this non-recursive text box or selector and change it to recursive so it gets all the header files. And then you're done. Then all you need to do is copy this little flag here and go into other linker flags and add that in right there. Or, sorry, not there. That's a little thing I get confused on. It's actually supposed to go under preprocessor macros over here, as you can see. Apple LLVM 7.0 preprocessing, and under preprocessing macros, double click over here, add, paste it in, go. Perfect. So, now that you've done that, go into GTL again, we're already here. Click on this little tab if it isn't already open. If it's blue, don't click it. Then, as you can see, you see this little GTL framework target? Remove it. And click delete. Then in the project navigator, open up GTL, go to GTL source, go to common, and delete HTTP fetcher. That's not required. Okay, because I think that was deprecated in iOS 9. Anyway, okay, so now what we're going to have to do is click on this little plus button over here, click a new project, iOS application, single view application. Then make this project named something like main app. Okay, make it for Swift, make sure it's the iPhone. You don't have to, it could also be the iPad, but I prefer iPhone in this case. And then click next. Again, I'm just going to create inside of this directory. Then we have to go into main app, build phases, link binary with libraries, add system configuration, add security, and also add, what is it called, libgtl touch. Let's just paste that in. Libgtl touch static lib.a. That's a mouthful. Okay, so now we're done that. Now what we should be able to do is copy this little linker flag. Now this time I'm actually correct. This is a linker flag. So go into build settings, type in other linker flags, and so double click over here, then add in Objective-C all load. Next, we need to, again, listen carefully. Go into user header, search paths, click the add button over here, then go back into your main Google Apps directory. Then go back into GTM session fetcher and again take the source and drag it in to the little text box. Then make this from non-recursive to recursive. Add another one. This time, do it for Google API Objective-C client. Yes. Take the source, drag it in, and make sure it's recursive. There we go. Now that should be good. And also one thing I've noted, I usually get an error if always search user paths is no. So I always make it yes, even though the Google documentation does not tell me to do that. I don't know why. Anyway, now let's go into preprocessor macros. Then what I'm going to do is under debug, I'm going to add the linker, the preprocessor macro, and also under release, so that it works in both ways. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Google API Objective-C client, source, OAuth 2, touch, and then take this nib file and just drag it right in, make sure it's copied, and then finish. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go in back over here and then go into the services directory, go into Gmail, generated, then get the GTL gmail.h and GTL gmail sources.m files and drag them into our app. Make sure it's copied. Finish. Make sure you create a bridging header. Make sure. Copy this code over here and paste it into your bridging header. And I just like to move it up here. Okay. So now, what we're going to have to do is they have a step 4 in which you type in code or you copy this code and put it in and then it does something. I'm not using their code. I've modified it a bit and now if I just open up my other app, where is it? Now specifically this file that I'm about to show you, this one, will be available for download in the description from GitHub. No other file, because actually this file is special, and the other files are very, how do I say, restricted to your setup. for example, I have to put in the absolute path, like over here in user. Like this is the directory in my Mac to this file. So I cannot give you this specific Xcode project, or else you won't be able to build. But if you follow all the steps that I'm doing in this video, or I'm using in this video, and you copy in the code that I do give you in the description, this should work just fine for you. Now, I've already gone ahead and done this, but you need to fill in your client ID and your client secret. If you don't know how to get that, which you should at this point, but it's okay. Go into your Google Developers Console, go into Credentials, click on the credential name, and get the client ID and the secret. So now that you have these two, just put them into these strings. You can change this if you'd like to, but I wouldn't recommend it. Actually, you know what? Let's just do that. Tanmay testing Gmail API. Okay, so now I'll show you exactly what this does, but first we're going to have to run this app. Now make sure you don't have this iOS framework as the active scheme. Make sure it's main app. Now run it. Till then, just give me a minute to remember. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to pause the video really quickly, get the other Gmail account that I don't really use the credentials for that one because I don't exactly remember them. Then I'm going to be back with the tutorial. Let me just really quickly see though if I can get it from here. Yeah, so I'm going to be pausing the video and I'll be right back with my credentials, and I won't touch the app or anything, don't worry. So welcome back. As I said, I have not really done anything to the code. All I've done is I've changed my password for a Gmail account I really don't use anymore. And so, as you can see, this is the simulator now. I didn't do anything on the simulator to the code or anything. This is all the exact same. So as you can see here, we have this Gmail account, or this Gmail login window. Now, I have not created this logo, these labels, this image, these text boxes, this button, anything here. This is nothing of mine. This is all created by Google. I'm not authenticating anything with this. I just say to Google, hello, I need this person to enter his username and password, and I want you to return his email address. And Google's like, sure, and then shows up a little view controller, asks them to log in. And then after that, once they log in, it returns the email address as I had requested it. So let me just log in really quickly. Tanmay Backstreet Demo 1. As you can see though, I'm just going to come over here to my Xcode. There's nothing printed except for all of this stuff. And so if we come back, and we actually log in now, password for YouTube video. Now if I sign in, and I click on the allow button so it knows that I'm allowed to use all of these things here. Then, as you can see, it does absolutely nothing on the app. Now, you might be thinking, why did I do all of this work for a blank screen? But it actually requested the Google API for your email address and printed it out there. Might not be so impressive, however, think about it. Now, you have used Google APIs to authenticate a user to get their username that you can upload to a parse database that will now be their single sign-on token, basically. That's just amazing. I will be integrating this into the actual chatting app in a separate video, but I hope you enjoyed that. Now, let's just see what happens when I rerun my app. As you can see, blank screen again, but it prints out my email address. Now, why didn't it ask me to authenticate again? This is because once you authenticate once, it's storing that authentication, token, basically, in Keychain. Keychain then stores that pretty much forever until you either delete it or don't make references to it anymore. And as you can see in Touches Began, I'm doing just that. I'm just deleting the keychain authentication method. So if I run once more, just so you know I'm not doing any trickery, it's still a blank screen and it gets my email address. However, if I click on the screen this time and then I rerun, as you can see, it'll ask me to authenticate again. This is due to the fact that it deleted the keychain token. Now I'm going to log in. So as you can see, I'm granting privileges right now. And it gets my email address. I'm going to run once more. So as you can see, it only happens once, and it still gets my email address. But there's one more thing that I can do. As you can see, I'm not clicking on the simulator. But if I change the keychain item name that it refers to something like this, then as you can see, it doesn't find the credentials in that keychain item, and it asks me to authenticate again, or actually, no, it has to be something like 3, sorry. This won't apply to you, it'll only apply to me. 2 already has credentials in it. So 3, as you can see, asks me to authenticate again. So that's essentially how that works. Now again, I'm not going to be going into any of this code just yet, due to the fact that this is all just enough code for you to implement into your app. And so this will allow you to make service calls. Now, since this is technically a Gmail API, you can do tons of stuff rather than just get their email address. You can, if you want to see what you can do, under Fetch Labels, go to Query, and under GTL Query Gmail, do .query 4, and you'll see these are all the queries you can do. You can literally, I think, compose messages. Well, I'm not exactly sure if you can compose messages, but you can get the messages, you can list messages, you can modify messages, you can send to trash, you can do all of these sorts of things. Yes, you can also send. So it's technically a Gmail API, but you can also get their profile. So it's quite interesting in that sense. Okay, so that was actually pretty much it for this tutorial. Again, if you have any more questions or you want me to elaborate on this at all, please leave it in the comments or email me at tadjimani@gmail.com, or even contact me on Twitter at tadjimani. They'll all be in the description. The view controller will be in this file over here will be on GitHub, there will be a link to in the description. And that was going to be it for this tutorial. If you liked the video, please like it, and if you're new to my content, you want to see more of it, please actually subscribe to my channel. Also, quickly, you can send me a video question at tadjimani@gmail.com, and I might just feature it in one of my next videos. Again, everything will be in the description, and that's going to be it. Goodbye.